Coming up this weekend, UFC 264, we've got a pair of some of the biggest heavyweights you're going to find in the Prince of War. Greg Hardy's taking on Bam Bam Tai Tuivasa. And for Australia's own Tuivasa, he was on a not-so-good losing streak. It seemed like he was out of the UFC by his own volition, only to end up in a fight with Stefan Struve, where he not only saved his career, but really kind of ended Stefan Struve's MMA career, not just UFC career, because he knocked him out once, jumped on the cage, tapped his ankle on Struve's head, and knocked him out again. Or that's what it looked like to me. Maybe you'd have to watch the replay a few times, just like Bozer's knuckle in the fence. But it wasn't, see? Now, for Tai Tuivasa, he looked great in his last fight, but it wasn't the fight he was supposed to have. He ended up taking on Harry Hunsucker, and if you know anything about Harry, he can knock out guys on the regional scene in the Midwest, but not Tai Tuivasa. Tuivasa looked great in that one, but that was almost to be expected against a guy that, I mean, no disrespect, Harry, you could knock me out 10 times over, and I just pop right back up like a weeble wobble.
He's probably a better salesman than you are, though, Harry, so there's a give and take to both of this.
But in that fight, Harry Hunsucker, he was a sacrificial lamb in that fight. For Greg Hardy, he took on much stiffer competition his last time out, Marcin Tybura. The first round, not the most competitive. The second round, he got finished. And for Greg Hardy, he looked not only bad, but human in that fight. Like, it was a weird one.
It really was. And for Greg Hardy, listen, people aren't going to give a fair, critique on his career no matter what. It's just, I'm not even going to get into it, but it's really hard to give a good opinion on what his career has been. But he has been a fighter who's made improvements. And it was really interesting because he seems like he's getting better. He makes, he stumbles out of the gate. There's the whole puffer thing. People don't like him anyways. And then you finally seem to improve enough to where, okay, you're ready for a contender. Now, at that time, Marcin Tybura wasn't the Marcin Tybura we know right now. He was okay, but he definitely didn't have the wins under his belt that he has right now, and he wasn't on the streak that he's on right now. Greg Hardy started that fight out looking really good, defended a few takedown attempts, was lighting Marcin Tybura up on the feet, and then he hit a wall. And it's weird because Greg Hardy has hit this wall in every single one of his fights. He had never fought anyone good enough to really capitalize on it. Where Greg Hardy is one of those fighters who, he's got that great first round. He can explode in that first round. But then his output does start to really fall off a cliff. And the weird thing about Greg Hardy is that I don't even know if it has to do with his cardio as much as just his output in a lot of his fights. Because if you look at his fights, it's been both ways, but the majority of the time, he'll win that first round, he can sort of win the second round, and then he holds on long enough to win that third round. And against a guy like Tai Tuivasa is at least going to bring a few hurdles that you're going to have to get over. Tai Tuivasa throws the calf kick very, very well. We saw the last guy do that to Greg Hardy, have great success with it in Yorgan De Castro. And really, Yorgan De Castro fights a lot like Tai Tuivasa. He just doesn't have the size, or I guess Tai Tuivasa's technique is a little bit better than Yorgan De Castro's, because I would say even you would have to agree with this, because there hasn't been a bigger naysayer of Tai Tuivasa than the man sitting to my right now. But he's gotten better in his last two fights. Like, he was a guy who I never really felt like evolved throughout the early part of his career, but I would say throughout the last two performances, he has shown minor improvements at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it for Tuivasa, it was definitely like, I'm a good fighter. Now I'm losing. What do? I'm starting to kind of gain water, tread water. And then he was stunting against Junior Dos Santos. That was a really weird fight. And listen, he fought Junior Dos Santos, and I get it. Like, the guy that fought Rosenstrike, the guy that fought anybody up the top, Cyril Gahn, he was really having a rough time in his career. But in that Tuivasa fight, he still had it a little bit within him. He still had the speed, he still had the power, and he looked great in that one. And Tuivasa definitely didn't. And again, if you go back through, let's talk the last five, the losing streak. JDS, Blagoy Ivanov, Sergey Spivak, those are all really good fighters. For Greg Hardy, you had the fight against Ben Sassoli. Alexander Volkov he loses to. Yorgan De Castro, Maurice Green, and then Marcin Tybura. So you come into a fight like this, a big step up for Hardy, even though, again, he fought the fight of, Marcin Tybura's life. Like, I bet you Marcin was in the background listening to that duet with Joe Cocker, like, love lift us up where we belong. And he just went in there and put down his game plan, just like he watched Sergey Spivak do to Tai Tuivasa. So, great win for Tybura, but when I focus in on this one, what improvements has Hardy made? Is his conditioning any better? Because again, this was a fast twitch lineman in the NFL. Now you're going for the long game in MMA, and it's totally different than those quick bursts over and over and over again. You can't have the old performance enhancing puffer. And there's a lot of differences. And obviously he's realized that. He's almost 33 years old. You get a little bit more leeway when you're a heavyweight, but right now at 7-3 with 1 no contest, this guy came into the UFC undefeated. So it's a really tricky fight for him. For Tuivasa, 2-fight win streak. And when I look at the odds, Matt, Tuivasa open a -170 favorite. He's a -139 right now. Greg Hardy open a +145. He's a +114. And for the total Tapology votes, surprise to us as it is to you. Wow, 1,497 total votes, 75% Tuivasa, 82% by knockout. For the 25% that have Hardy, 60% by knockout. I think we're going to get a finish in this one as well. So if there was an under 2.5, I'd go with it. If it's at 1.5, which I suspect it will be at, I'm going to have a hard time with that one. But what are you thinking in terms of the X's and O's as to who's going to win here?
Jordan Castro is beating Greg Hardy by basically being slightly faster with his footwork, having better leg kicks, and then just having, and I'm not even saying good volume, having slightly better volume than Greg Hardy. He was well on his way to winning a 30-27 in that fight before he did break his foot and just completely abandoned the leg kicks. I don't think Tai Tuivasa is going to have that same problem. I don't really think the bones in his feet are going to give way, and if I can somehow predict that, then I'm some kind of a clairvoyant, which I obviously am not. But I do like the overall game of Tai Tuivasa. Like I said, we've seen Greg Hardy struggle with guys who do the things very similar to Tai Tuivasa. I do think the leg kick should be a big weapon for Tai, and I do think the overhands eventually will land on a guy like Greg Hardy. Should be an interesting fight. I do think we're going to learn a lot about both guys either way, but I do have to side with Tai Tuivasa.
I'm on a fence. I like Tuivasa to outlast Hardy, and if it goes up against the fence, if there's any clinch work, I like the uppercuts from Tuivasa. I like the complete game. I never thought I'd say that out of Tai Tuivasa, but again, if he can land the kicks, we've seen them from Hardy in the past, but he will kind of get away from them, and it just kind of gets a little bit instinctual when he's out there in the cage. But I do like Australia's Tuivasa in this fight, both of us going with the man they call Bam Bam. We got 2 more big fights coming up. Welterweight Showcase, Burns, Wonder Boy, both former title challengers at 170 pounds. And up at the top, both former champions. You've got Poirier taking on McGregor in the 3rd installment of the trilogy. You're not going to want to miss that. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.